Hello and welcome to the Australian Roundtable Podcast. Today is Sunday, March 29, 2015. This is episode number 25 of our weekly broadcast. I'm your host, Johnno, and I'm joined in the studio by my good friend, Tristan. Thanks for being here.
No worries, Johnno. Pleasure to be here.
And we're linked via Google Hangout to our resident wise old elder, the silver fox himself, Lindsay. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. I'm very pleased to be here.
And Ethan Nash of TOTT News will join us via Google Hangout. Surely he's not here now, though, so it's just the three of us to get the show started. And Tristan, since you're here, mate, if people get sick of my voice, why don't you do the honours and read out the quick blurb?
I don't think anyone
for the new
gets
listeners.
Sick of your voice, Johnno. Don't be silly.
All right.
The Australian Roundtable Podcast is a Brisbane-based independent news analysis discussion panel podcast which broadcasts live every Sunday from 3 p.m. Live listeners can take part in a live chat forum at the YouTube channel during broadcasts. All episodes are archived at that channel. The show features an eclectic panel of presenters who come together each week to discuss recent and topical news and current affairs from Australia and around the world, and provides an alternative perspective to that presented by the corporate media. Views presented by individual panelists and guests are not necessarily representative of the entire panel, and each presenter is solely responsible for his or her own comments and claims. All important information cited during the broadcast we linked at our site ozroundtable.com, so you can verify and analyze it for yourself, which we always recommend you do. Episodes generally run 2 hours, and although it is a roundtable discussion, we do keep to a rough structure for each episode, generally breaking up the show into a domestic and international segment.
Oh, very well done, Tristan. It's good to have you on board, my good man. So, yeah, we do have an agenda, and just while I've been fiddling around, I seem to have misplaced it, but that's okay, because in the meantime, we've been joined by Ethan Nash of TOTT News. Ethan, how you doing, mate?
Not too bad, Johnno. Can you hear me?
Yep, you're coming in loud and clear. Just give me a second. Oh, here we go. We've got 10 topics for domestic. I'll just run through them really quickly. Superannuation, family violence, a hit and run in the news, metadata laws, Call of Duty and video gamers being used to fly drones, government setting quotas for women, coal seam gas, Australia is apparently too white, national authority on food, the national regulatory body on food has been disbanded apparently, and also something to do with canola, an issue that's been in the news lately with Steve Marsh. And then international, we've got 3 topics. I want to talk about limited hangout. Ethan wants to talk about Facebook controlling news, and finally, after a lot of demand, Lindsay will finally take us through a quick brief overview of the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. So we've got a huge show ahead of us today, boys, but we'll start off on a bit of a lighter note, and I'll throw to you there, Lindsay, the silver fox. How have you been the last little while, my friend? How are things?
Yeah, no, very good, thanks. Yeah, you know what it's like when you get to this age. You just life just keeps rolling on, I suppose. Yeah, no problems at all this week. Thanks for that.
And how about you, Ethan? You had to join us a little bit later. Some technical difficulties, I understand. But apart from that, how have you been?
Yeah, not too bad, Johnno. Another week fighting against this system that we have, and I'm enjoying every week. It gets better and better every week, and I'm so happy to be a part of podcasts like this and this community, as I've always said, every week. So I'm looking forward to a good show. There's a lot of topics.
Yeah, it certainly is. And finally, you there, Tristan, sitting across from me in another lovely Brisbane afternoon. How have you been lately, my good man?
Fantastic. Looking forward to exposing more lies and waking people up.
All right. Well, I'll tell you what, let's get straight into it. And we like to start the show, boys, with something to have a bit of a laugh at. And I've got one here from The Guardian. Now, this article is from, let's see, a couple of days ago, March 26, 2015. The headline is NASA plans mission to land on asteroid and explore deep space. And I'm going to read out a quick passage from it. Quote, NASA is aiming to launch a rocket to an asteroid in 5 years and grab a boulder off it. A stepping stone and training mission for an eventual trip sending humans to Mars. The space agency Wednesday unveiled details of the $1.25 billion plan to launch a solar-powered unmanned spaceship to an asteroid in December 2020. The ship would spend about a year circling the large rock and pluck a 4-meter boulder off its surface using robotic arms. It would have 3 to 5 opportunities to grab the rock, said Robert Lightfoot, NASA's associate administrator. The smaller rock would be hauled near the moon and parked in orbit around the moon. Using a giant rocket ship and the Orion crew capsule that is still being developed, 2 astronauts would fly to the smaller rock in 2025 and start exploring. Astronauts aboard Orion would dock with the robotic ship, make spacewalks climbing around the mini asteroid to inspect and document, and even grab a piece to return to Earth. The smaller rocket might not even be big enough for the 2 astronauts to stand on. It would have to fit in the cargo bay of the now retired space shuttles. The mission will demonstrate the capabilities we're going to need for further human missions beyond low Earth orbit and then ultimately to Mars, Lightfoot said, end quote. And the article just goes on and on like that. Now, we haven't really spoken too much about NASA on the show, but it's become one of my favourite topics lately, boys. And I read about this $1.25 billion mission to pluck an asteroid and make the moon have its own moon. And I think they are laughing at us, so we might as well laugh along with it. I'll throw it to you there, Lindsay. What say you?
Yeah, no, I think it's really good. It's almost like it's this huge black hole you can keep shoveling money into. So you just come up with some bullshit story about, oh, we're going to send men to the moon or, you know, whatever, the next thing. And obviously they're planning to go on for 25 or 30 years so that they can just keep ripping billions and billions out. And God only knows where that goes. Does it go into black ops or what does it go into? It obviously is not going into what they're saying it's going into. But anyway, I won't go on and on. I'll throw it back to you.
That's obvious to you, Silver Fox, but I think a lot of people are reading these kind of articles and they're nodding their head agreeing. This all makes perfect sense to them. The idea of plucking an asteroid out of its orbit and putting it into an orbit around the moon, they don't see any problems with this. Ethan, please tell me that you can see one or two problems with this story.
Oh, absolutely. Straight from off the bat, just reading that story itself sounds ridiculous when you actually sit and listen to what's actually being said there and you actually think of the resources and the technology and everything that would need to be done to make this sort of thing happen. And I completely agree with Lindsay. This is all of these sort of space missions present a very convenient way to hide where a money trail is leading and where a lot of funding is going that you can just keep for yourselves. So I think any time that anything is related to space or endeavors or missions to other planets, after we know about what we know about the moon and all of these other things, you've always got to be cautious and you've always got to ask the most serious question, where does the money go?
Well, you know, Greg Williams in the live chat says that they have to fund ISIS with something. And who knows, maybe this NASA money is ISIS money, Tristan. What say you?
Oh, look, it's certainly a possibility. I think it's funny they're laughing at us with the names of these people as well. Lightfoot, I mean, Jesus. I mean, like, what are they going to come up with next? Buzz Lightyear? Buzz Lightyear, next mission to Mars.
They could do that. They could have Associate Professor Buzz Lightyear says that we're sending Stephen Hawking to Mars, and most people would believe it. If NASA says that they're sending Stephen Hawking to Mars, the majority of the sheep will believe this nonsense. And you know what? Now when I'm reading the mainstream media, I'm looking for the articles about NASA and about the moon because they give me a chuckle every time. But we've got a lot of important things to talk about today, so we better get into the first topic. And Lindsay, I know that you're a keen reader of the Courier Mail, and I know you've got a few topics for us today, starting off with superannuation.
Yeah, I will. Thank you very much. In Brisbane, we've got a daily Murdoch newspaper, the Courier Mail, and this past week there have been a few stories of note from an Australian perspective, and this is one of them. Now, I think it's important. It might not sound important to other people, but I can assure you it is. First of all, in my opinion, in an opinion piece by somebody called Joff Lelliot, Jofflelliott, who is, interestingly enough, is a board member of the Australian Fabians. He had an article on the 27th of March in which he states, quote, Australia's compulsory superannuation system is undoubtedly world-class public policy. Now, whatever the hell that means. But, quote, its success has been an unintended consequence. Since policymakers have come to see superannuation as the only way in which they can help people build their savings. Former Liberal Treasurer Peter Costello rightly poo-pooed the Treasurer Joe Hockey's recent suggestion of allowing it to be raided to fund deposits for first homes, education or retraining, while Paul Keating, the father of Australia's superannuation system, accused the Liberals of hating its universality, and that's the end of the quote. He then goes on to discuss British superannuation changes over the years and how successful or unsuccessful they were from his perspective. The thing that interested me about this article was the floating of the idea, and specifically the word, that superannuation should be raided and used for purposes other than the purpose for which it was initiated, namely the retirement benefit of the person paying the money into the scheme. Now, this ties in with the other long article I have ready to speak about sometime in the future, and that is that the age pension contributions by Australian workers, which have been converted by the trustees, the Commonwealth parliamentarians. None of these politicians can be trusted to deal with our money without stealing it. Now, I'm not talking through my hat here. That's true. You can't trust them as far as you can throw them. There are foreign instances in places such as Argentina and Poland where superannuation was converted into either government bonds or just confiscated. Now, when push comes to shove, all governments will steal or tax, as that's what they call it, superannuation to your detriment. And I really think we all have to beware. And anybody I speak to up front, I always say to them, you know, really don't depend on your super, because these people will confiscate it. Don't depend on it. Anyway, I'll throw that back to you.
Well, we should give the background to the international listeners there, Lindsay. Superannuation is a government program. I guess it was started back, in the 1980s by, was it Paul Keating? It was either the 1980s or the early 1990s, where they said that it's now 9 or 11%, but a certain percentage of every single person's income has to be set aside into what we call a superannuation fund, which is like a forced savings account. But it's usually not savings. It's usually into super funds, which are basically like investment funds, if that makes sense. And it's compulsory. You don't have any choice about it, and you can't touch it till you're 65 or 67, or if you get cancer, I think they let you access some of it. I mean, there are ways to get around it, I guess, in a way, but for the vast majority of people, they're forced to save something like 9 or 11% of their income into these forced savings accounts. And what you're saying is that you believe that when it gets time to retirement, a lot of people won't have any savings to dip into, and the government's even starting to publicly announce things that look like we're heading that way. Ethan, I'll throw it to you.
Yeah, I completely agree. I did accounting at school and was always continuously told about superannuation and all these things that would go, and it just seems so unrealistic to me for at least my generation that we're never going to get to our superannuation, even if it was the way that they say that it's going, because the government, you know, are continuously taking from it. Just look what happened in Greece when everyone's superannuation fund equivalent over there was being taken by the government to pay back debt that the people didn't owe, that the country doesn't owe, that no one owes the debt to, in this whole implosion of the euro over there. It just seems that superannuation is going to be a thing of the past very soon, and we've said that for a long time, but every day with news articles like this, it just keeps getting worse and worse, Johnno.
Yeah, Tristan here. It makes me quite angry as an Australian citizen to have to put away this much, and not to mention they're increasing the percent. I think it's 9 at the moment, but they're pushing it up to 11 or 12. And yeah, it's very frustrating that we don't have the ability to opt into this as Australian citizens, because I believe that it should be opt-in, and you know, potentially if you opt in, you might get certain subsidiaries on certain things, but it's compulsory, and there's a good chance we won't have any access to it. What do you think, Lindsay?
Yeah. I had a fellow working for me years ago, and I had to pay superannuation for him, and it really used to upset me because at the end of the year, he virtually saved nothing because of the administration costs. I'd much rather give it to him in his pocket so he can go down and buy a few cartons of beer. At least he gets something out of it. And that's what I'm saying to you. You go and have a look at, like IHH, the insurance company. You have a look at these sort of people. They're all crooks. I'm not exaggerating. They're all crooks. And if they can find a way, they will dud you of your money. That's the message I keep getting across to people. Okay, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, and it reminds me of the book by George Orwell, Animal Farm, where in Animal Farm, for those who haven't read it, it's a short book. I recommend you check it out. It's a lot easier to read than 1984 because it's shorter and it's a nicer story in a lot of ways. And one of the characters, the hardest working character who helps to build everything that they're forced to build as part of the farm, the hard-working mayor, the promise is that at the end of your career, you get a little patch where you get to retire. Like, that's part of the deal. All the little animals have to work hard, but then when they get to retire, they get given their own plot of land to retire in peace. And of course, what happens when the mayor gets too old to do any more work, it's actually sent to the knackery. That's what happens. There's no retirement. It's all a fairy tale. And a lot of the commenters in the live chat are saying that superannuation has been set up to fail. And the more that you look into the way that these superannuation funds operate, and the more you understand about how investment banks and the stock market work in general, the more you understand that's probably the case. These things have been set up to fail. In our generation, if they think they're ever seeing their superannuation, well, I wish them luck. I hope they're right, but it doesn't look that way at all. We've got a lot of topics to get through today, Lindsay, so I want to give you the final word on this one before we press on. Any other thoughts on superannuation?
No, I haven't got any. I've said it all that I wanted to say. Thanks.
Well, I'll tell you what, in the live chat, we've got about 30 people watching right now, and Robot Broken says that he wants to live to the day when he gets to see monster trucks on the moon. Yeah. Thanks to all the live commenters. It's good to have you all there. We've got to move on. The next topic's yours as well, Lindsay, and that's a little bit more of a serious one, and that is family violence, how it's portrayed in the media. I'll throw to you.
Okay, thank you for that. On the 26th of March, there was an opinion piece by one of the journalists called Jane Fines Clinton, and it was about family violence. This was a follow-on from a number of these items that have been going on for weeks about domestic violence, and they're usually related to Quentin Bryce. She was the ex-Governor-General, and her investigation into domestic violence. This article was skewed towards the understanding of youth about domestic violence, this one in particular on the 26th. And the main reason I raise it is the admission in it that, quote, when a third of women will experience violence at the hand of their intimate partner in their lifetime, and increasing evidence that 1 victim in 3 of domestic violence is male, why do we continue sagely that violence occurs but never to us or to those we know, end of quote. Now, this admission that 1 in 3 victims is male is a major chink in the armour of the poor woman, bad men propaganda that these people have been going on for a very long time in the mainstream media. They've been pushing it for years. And it's probably been going on for as long as this current wave of feminism has been raging. Now, I'll be filing this little snippet away for later use, because I think you'll find that we will be able to use it later on, just to pull them up when they get too carried away with how bad men are to women, and it's never in reverse. I'll leave it go at that and see what you fellas have to say.
I'll throw to you there, Ethan Nash. Obviously, we've got the 2 people in the live studio, 2 people on the Hangout, so it's a little bit harder with our throws, but Ethan, we'll get you into the conversation. What do you say about all of this?
Thanks, Johnno. Fantastic find, Lindsay. That's really great that you discovered those statistics there. To put away, as you said, for later reference, I've spoken about it before. I'm quite certain it's been on this show. This cultural Marxist destruction of language and all of this whole system that they've developed to broaden the terms of domestic violence to not include the actual perception that people have of people being physically hurt and whatnot, to extend it to more of a feminist second wave, third wave feminism ideology. And my main problem is that with this propaganda, as you just spoke of, Lindsay, it really takes away from the real people that are really suffering from this, whether it's men or women. At the end of the day, that's what it is for me. I'm completely against anyone hurting anyone, and especially in a relationship where it happens. But the way that they've just skewed this with propaganda from either side, talking about domestic violence and how it's continuously in the media because it has this cultural Marxist agenda behind it, that's the real issue for me. And I'm glad you could find that information snippet there, Lindsay, just so we can refer back to say, well, if they're lying to you about what they're trying to present it as on the surface, and that can help us get towards the greater agenda behind this domestic violence. I'll throw that to you, Tristan.
Yeah, you make some great points there, Ethan. One sort of thing that I'd like to touch on, and I think Sol, one of our live listeners, has said the feminist BS bothers me to no end, and I agree. I think that this feminism thing and the breakdown of the gender roles in Australian society and also in most of the 6I countries, this just sort of further helps promote that ideology that women and men are exactly the same as individuals, and it sort of I don't know, it sort of breaks down the roles that we should be having in our houses and attacks certain individuals or certain groups of people that shouldn't be attacked, and I don't agree with it at all. And furthering this Marxist agenda and stuff like that, it's pretty annoying. What do you think?
Well, we can get into a broader discussion about gender roles and the cultural Marxism in the international segment, where Lindsay's going to talk about the book, The Protocols of Learned Elders of Zion, because it all plays into that. I guess going back to this notion of family violence in the media, Lindsay, we've touched on this before. The constant bombardment in the mainstream media of domestic violence, violence against women, domestic violence, violence against women. That Rosie Batty was made the Australian of the Year. She was the woman whose son was allegedly killed by his father, and she somehow became a champion for ending domestic violence and all of this nonsense. We're bombarded by it almost on a daily basis, this notion that men still don't know how to respect women. And you have to eventually realize there's an agenda behind all of this. And once you realize what that agenda is, you can see how sick that agenda is. Lindsay, I'll throw to you.
Yeah, I agree. I am not trying to condone violence in any way. To me personally, I maintain that men are built the way they are. We're bigger in the upper body, all that sort of thing, designed to protect women and children. That's what nature designed us for. It wasn't designed to beat women and children up. You know, that's to me, people who do that are loathsome individuals. But what we're talking about here is not the numbers that are doing it, it's the propaganda. I think that's what I'm trying to get at. Okay, that'll do me. I've said.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's complete propaganda, and I think it is aimed to further reinforce this notion that men can't be trusted, because once upon a time, men were trusted as the physical head of the household. Just as you said, Lindsay, that's what they were designed for. A lot of people don't like to hear that. That's because they've been indoctrinated to believe that everyone's the same. Even though we're clearly not all the same, there are biological differences between men and women, and this notion of domestic violence, men still don't know how to respect women, all of these people are being harmed, blah, blah, blah. No doubt there is domestic violence out there, no one disputes that, but why are we being constantly bombarded with this message that Australian men don't know how to respect women? Well, I think it's pretty obvious. They're just trying to reinforce this notion that you can't trust men, men aren't to be trusted. And if you can break down the family unit, well, it's all part of the cultural Marxist agenda that we'll talk more about later in the show. But we do have to move on to the next topic because we've got so much to get through today, guys. And while we've still got you there, Lindsay, in the Courier Mail, you've got another article for us. This one's about a hit and run that made the news.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry if I'm sort of dominating at the moment, but I'm sure everybody else will get a chance in a minute. This was called Double Jeopardy. It was a headline on the 27th of March, and it read, "The hit and run death of Ashley Humphreys has taken another tragic twist with the sudden death yesterday of the man police believe was driving the car that struck her on Sunday morning." Now, this follows on from a front page headline on the 23rd of March, which read, "She was run down by a coward. Now cops hunt Ashley's killer." Then, in the extra bold, "Left to die." Now, it was quite astounding. It was huge headlines. At this point, I'd like to ask, was there any evidence that anyone had killed anyone? Or was this just an unfortunate accident? The television news services were stating that the police were considering charging the offender, and now we've got 2 deaths. It would appear on the face of it that the driver has taken his own life. I mean, I'm not certain about that, but that's the way it would appear. I would think from shame or embarrassment or whatever. After this young girl was hit while she was lying or kneeling on the road at or near an intersection. Now, who in the Courier Mail and or the police is going to take responsibility for their appalling, gutless and coward headlines, those 2 words are in quotes, when police were still conducting their investigations and looking for evidence that anyone had been killed? This reeks of Port Arthur to me. I mean, I can remember the Port Arthur, and there were pictures of Martin Bryant with the big headlines, "This is the man," in the newspapers. And that was even before an ID parade. Now, I'm heartily fed up with Rupert's boys and girls prejudging people on their front pages and prejudicing trials. And in this case, most probably causing the death of an innocent who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. We may have to put a submission, and I'm calling on everybody who listened to this, we may have to put submissions to this effect into the coroner's hearing, calling for journalists and editors to be charged when they do this. They've got to be pulled into line. That'll do me now. I'll throw it back to you.
Well, Lindsay, I go through your agenda every morning to see which articles you want to talk about. And the reason why I wanted to talk about this one is because it's further evidence of the way that the mainstream media can influence opinion and does so. Now, this might seem like a trivial matter compared to some. This is just a hit and run, and one person might find himself in prison for a long time. We'll see what happens. It seems trivial, but it goes to the heart of this notion that the mainstream media can and does manipulate the people, influence what they believe, and can influence the outcome of court trials. Now, you might not think that you'll ever end up in that situation, but I'm sure this guy in this article thought the same thing. And now, next thing you know, before the investigation is even completed, the Rupert Murdoch press is coming out and calling him cowardly, gutless, what have you, and maybe he is, maybe isn't. But once again, the media changes their stories so many times, even on the one topic, you can't believe a single word they say. Ethan, I'll throw to you.
Yeah, I completely agree with what you said, Johnno. I refer back to an article I wrote on my website, tottnews.com, called Analysing Mass Media Fear and Manipulation, where I broke down how the media influence and use fear as a way, and use propaganda and sensationalism as a way to resonate these public opinions in the minds of the people, but then not only forming their public opinion, they can then skew it to serve their agenda. And this is just another prime example. Another example was when MH17 happened, and the Daily Mail over in the United Kingdom had "Putin killed my children," Putin's victims, all of these major headline stories all over these newspapers without a single shred of evidence that could point Putin as anything, that they were behind it, that the rebels they were funding were behind it, all of this nonsense, but the media still go ahead with it. And Lindsay's absolutely right. We do need to, especially in Australia, we do need to hold these journalists accountable. We need to hold their editors accountable, that are the ones that approve it. That's the worst part of them all. The education system, which teaches journalists how to do this, everything needs to be held accountable for, because, as you said, this may seem like a trivial matter to some, but on the surface level, it may seem like it's nothing. But once you go deeper down, it's a lot bigger than that. I'll throw that back to you.
Yeah, that's some really good points there. I always love hearing your opinions on journalism, Ethan. I think another really sad point is the crippling pressure of the media and what it's done to this person, to the point where they've actually felt that they wanted to take their own life because of the criticism that they would receive from all of this. And it's just another example of how much power and control that they have over people individually, if you let them have it. That's the thing. If you let them have it, if you don't want them to have control, that's a choice that you can make, and band together with people to stop that. And yeah, I think a call to action would be bringing people to justice, these journalists, and charging them, as you said. I think it was Lindsay, and yeah, making people write the right stuff, because this has profound effects on the Australian populace, Johnno.
Yeah, well, Greg Williams in the live chat says, control the media and you control the people's minds. And it's as simple as that. The mainstream media is mind control. That's what it's all about. And as many of us have seen over the last few months, there's mind control happening, even not just in the mainstream media, but even the so-called alternative media, the independent media. It happens at all levels. It's so important for the government to control our minds. That's why they spend so much time and effort on it. And I think later in the show we'll get to spend more time talking about that. But again, we have to keep pressing on. There was one more article, Lindsay, in the Courier Mail that you wanted to talk about. And this had to do with Call of Duty, a huge front page article in the Courier Mail just a few days ago entitled Call of Duty. So I'll let you take that one away.
Okay, thanks for that. Yeah, it was on the 24th of March, and the front page had looked like a soldier dressed up in the full battle gear. It reminded me of the police at the G20, that sort of uniform, very threatening with a gun and what have you. And the headline was Call of Duty, Real Life Diggers. And quote, Defence is searching for its next generation of officers on gaming websites, famous for their reviews of military-style video games. Now, that was the end of the quote. The first thing that came into my mind was a reference to a US drone coming to the Melbourne Air Show a few weeks ago. We spoke of it on this podcast. And I remember at the time, the Defence spokesman, it might have even been the Chief of the Defence Forces, but they were showing interest in the use of drones in Australia, and that does worry me. I can tell you, an army prepared to take out suspected terrorists in our own suburbs by remote-controlled drones and rockets operated by ex-gamers, to me, is a very frightening scenario. I mean, I might be getting carried away here, but it just, why else would you be going after to ex-gamers? Anyway, I'll throw that back to you and see what you fellas have got to say.
Yeah, it's a very good point. I think one of the reasons that they're keen for these sort of people is twofold. One of them is they're very good at what they do, and operating computer screens and identifying targets and eliminating them is something that they've literally trained their whole lives to do. And additionally, they've been desensitized. That to me is one of the biggest points about this, is they don't have the same sense of fear and exhilaration that you would get on the battlefield if you're just sitting at a screen on a computer. You just don't have that interaction between the people, and I think that these are the perfect candidates for something like that, because they've been doing it all their lives, and effectively it's just swapping games. It's not actually doing anything different.
Yeah, I want to make it clear again for the listeners. In Brisbane, we've got the one major newspaper, that's Rupert Murdoch's Courier Mail, and the front page was an entire photo, Call of Duty, and it was essentially a it was a propaganda piece supporting this notion of getting the young kids of today to become military members whose job is to fly the drones. And I've got more to say on that. Before I do that, Ethan, I'll throw to you. Did you happen to see that front page? And if you did, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I did see, Johnno. It makes you sick, doesn't it? Like, when you actually think about it, I think Tristan raised a fantastic point. Everyone's been desensitized that gets involved in this, and there's a lot of studies that show just the effects that gaming and whatnot can have on the mind. Take those individuals and then put them into an environment where they could be. We knew from Pine Gap that we were helping the US drone bomb in Yemen and Pakistan and Libya over in the Middle East. We were a major part of that through the PRISM leaks, through the documents that were released. And to get someone out of a gaming environment and put them, as Tristan said, it's almost like swapping games. It's so desensitized, because now, even though it's in real life, you're still behind a screen, you're still doing the same thing, and it makes you almost sick that they are putting these propaganda pieces on front pages of these major newspapers read by thousands of people. Most of them might be gamers, who knows, to encourage them to say, hey, if you're good at gaming, you can have a career just gaming, when it's a lot worse than that. You're conducting warfare, you're conducting surveillance operations. It's really sick when you think about it, and the way that they are making the people believe that this is a good thing through their propaganda pieces. Johnno, I'll throw it back to you.
And I think it's easy for those of us who don't have younger brothers that we live with, and we don't have kids. We don't realise just how huge gaming has become. But whereas for even in people my age, when we were kids, we loved video games, but it really wasn't the cool thing. It was just something that we did for fun. Whereas now, my understanding is that for the younger kids today, it's actually the cool thing. The guy at school who's the highest ranked on the different video game platforms, whatever. I mean, the kids who can possibly make money playing games now, you can make money doing it. It's actually become the cool thing. Cool in sport, possibly even cooler than girls, is being the gamer. It's a huge aspect, and it's one that we haven't really spent enough time on this show talking about, because the last I heard a couple of years ago, the video game industry is now, in terms of just the net dollars that are made in producing them, is a bigger industry than Hollywood mainstream films. I believe that might be the case. I might be mistaken, but either way, it's now a huge industry, and we can see how Hollywood is used in propaganda. We can see how it's used to condition the masses to believe or accept certain things. You better believe they're doing the exact same thing with video games, Tristan.
Yeah, I agree. And just recently, there was a thing, I think it was by Blizzard, they're promoting through a thing called Heroes of the Storm. If you get to a certain level or something like that, they'll actually fund your university degree. Just a short note on that, which I thought was pretty interesting.
It is, certainly is. Lindsay, you would have been a little bit older than most when video games first hit the scene, but are you familiar with just how big an aspect of most young boys' lives video games have become?
Yeah, perhaps not as much as you fellas, but I had some friends who had grandkids who were big on video games. And I remember, this is maybe 10 years ago now, I remember there was one that was like a wrestling match, and you could change it to the amount of blood that they were coming out, when you smashed them over the head with a chair and all this. And I remember thinking at the time, for 5 or 6 year olds, this really isn't very good for their brain. It just concerned me that you could crank up the level of violence and things like that. So yeah, I've got a bit of an idea. Perhaps not as much as you fellas.
Yeah, and when we talk about the impact of Hollywood, I want to refer to the film RoboCop. Now, back in 1987, Paul Verhoeven released the 1987 version of RoboCop. It was a film that I loved, and there was another RoboCop last year. And I don't usually go and watch movies at the cinemas. I don't really watch any movies these days, but I thought I'll go along because I knew I was going to be disappointed, because every time they remake a film, it's terrible, right? Well, I was wrong. It was actually a pleasantly, surprisingly good film. There were always good themes in Paul Verhoeven's films like Total Recall and RoboCop. There were good themes in the 2014 remake as well, and one of them was this idea that if you're okay with the government using drones in other countries, how long until they start using drones in your countries? In the film RoboCop, they masked it by using these machines that sort of walk through the city, and the question was, do we want these machines walking through our cities? Well, with drones, it's almost worse than that. They'll be flying above, you'll never know where they are, and there's a good chance that the kids that are playing video games today, they'll be the ones flying those drones in the future, Ethan.
Yeah, I completely agree, Johnno. as I said, it's really sick when you actually think about it, and the way that and it's not just through this. This is one example of how it happens, but people have related this to guns, to gun violence, to everything. The media, this whole society around us, this culture of video games and of entertainment and of violence and whatnot. And I'm not saying for 1 minute that because you play a game you're going to go out and kill someone, or that you're going to be, you know what I mean, you're going to be desensitized to that level. But it does take away some sort of barriers that you would have normally if you weren't exposed to those sorts of things. And to get people that are so brainwashed to get involved in all of these things, whether it's violence on the news, which then accumulates to violence in the streets because people just see violence on the news, they think that's the way the world is, to video games where, you know, people are now being recruited for drone operations, as Tristan said, to fund your university. It's become the cool thing. It's just about destroying value, in my opinion, value and you know what I mean, like just the overall culture of society is being destroyed, because what we once knew as values and what we once knew as the world around us is quickly becoming something that they want to paint within our subconscious, Johnno.
Yeah, think about it this way. When a pilot is training to become a pilot, how do they train him? In a simulator. And that's what's happening with our kids today. They're playing games, and not all of them are going to become drone operators. Of course, that's not the case. And not all of them are even going to go out and shoot people. I don't really believe that's the case either. It's not about that. It's not about the literal direct connection. It's about what they're preparing the kids for, what they're preparing society for. And they're getting us all used to shooting at things, and the more realistic the games become, the higher definition the TVs become, slowly but surely it goes from being just a little video game for fun to genuine training for outright warfare in the skies, controlling drones. And Rorschach in the live chat said that GTA 5, Grand Theft Auto 5, made billions in its first week. I just looked that up, yeah. Apparently it made $1 billion in sales in the first 3 days. So when we say that the video game industry is huge, we're not kidding around, and it probably is something that we should spend more time talking about. I guess I don't really play video games that much these days, and I don't think Tristan does either. I don't think you do either. It's really not something that we're that familiar with, but perhaps we should get ourselves more familiar with it, because this is influencing people today. We do have to move on to the next topic, though. Time is of the essence. And the final topic from the Courier Mail for you, Lindsay, and this will lead into something that Ethan's prepared for us, is to do with metadata. Now, the background here, again, especially for our international listeners, is these metadata laws that were passed in the last few days. So now the first two tranches of legislation, supposed anti-terror legislation, were passed. This metadata stuff took a little bit longer to pass. Finally, it's passed. And Lindsay, you want to take it away from there?
Okay, thank you for that. On the 27th of March, there was an article in the Courier Mail on page 26 with a headline, Senate lets new data law through. And that was the quote. Now, basically, the metadata laws have passed through the Parliament, and metadata will be stored for 2 years. But, quote, but it is unclear how much will be added to internet users' monthly bills. Quote, the government believes the laws, which allows about 85 security and policing agencies to access 2 years of an individual's metadata, are crucial to thwart terrorism attacks and prevent serious crime, end of quote. Now, they don't even know how many agencies will be allowed to access this stuff. About, they say, about. Well, then, God on, that could mean any damn thing. And we have to pay for this ourselves, apparently. And another quote was, the scheme will cost about $400 million a year, but the government will not reveal its share until the May budget, end of quote. So we don't know where we stand with this. They're going to spy on us. We're going to have to pay for it, but we don't know how much. Anyway, I'll just leave it. I'll throw it back to you, fellas. I was absolutely appalled when I read this.
Yeah, it's no good, and I know that Ethan's prepared a feature piece for us, so he might as well take it away, and then we'll get into the general discussion.
Yeah, thanks, Johnno. This was a bit of a blow for me personally, just being, you know, one of my topics that I've followed since 2012, and data retention and metadata, the terminology has been around since 2010. That's how long it's taken them to get this plan in. It's been coming for a long time, and I gave a feature piece last week on the show talking about metadata. What is metadata? What's going to be stored? Getting past the mainstream propaganda of what they're trying to tell you it is, just put it out black and white that it can paint a digital blueprint of you, regardless of whether they actually have the information or not. The dangers with our alliances that we have, the 5, 6 Eyes Alliance, sharing these data all around the world, which is not going to be discussed within this sort of thing. And yeah, it's this week. Unfortunately, I thought that I'd come back with a new update about how the Senate debates have been going, but I was tuned into the Senate live watching the debates, and it was just brushed through so quickly. The laws will force telecommunication providers to keep records of phone and internet use for 2 years and allow security agencies to access the records. For those, to add a context for those that are not aware of what these metadata retention laws are going to entail, and it was quite a defeat for me watching in the Senate. As always, Senate politicians in our Senate that have done good work, the small things, regardless of what you think of the Green people like Scott Ludlam, all of these politicians that have been actually fighting against metadata, they said that you will be judged for this because of the unanimous support. At the end, Scott Ludlam and everyone apologised to the Australian public in a very emotional speech that they gave that was really gripping to the people that have fought against this for a while, like myself included, saying that we're sorry that we couldn't stop this from going through. We're sorry that now that you have to face the consequences. We're going to try and add some amendments or try and get this repealed. It was something that really is finally the final bit of freedom that we do have under these laws. We talked about the first piece of legislation that was introduced earlier in this year, the second piece, which had draconian measures that were unprecedented in most of the world, not just Australia. And now this third one, and ironically, The Guardian posted an article called New Data World Order. Government can read every Australian like an open book. The story of your life in metadata is an open book. It paints a picture of where you went, who you spoke with, how long you were there for. What were you doing on the phone talking to the sexually transmitted infections clinic, as Lindsay suggested last week? What were you doing on the street corner where the man was murdered last night? Privacy at its most basic level is about the right of citizens to be left alone by their governments. At the heart of what is happening right now in Australia is the debate around this very idea. And as the federal government succeeded in passing its data retention laws on Thursday, it is an idea that is being challenged more than it has ever before. So this notion that we need to give up more of our freedoms for so-called security. And I won't take up too much time, but just to give a background, now that the legislation has come through, the Telecommunications Interception and Access Amendment Data Retention Bill 2014, which was introduced to Parliament on October 30, and then redrafted by the Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security, which rejected it in 2012 because they didn't have this ISIS boogeyman propaganda. It obviously requires our metadata to be stored for 2 years, define what types of metadata must be retained, such as phone numbers, length of phone calls, email addresses at the time the message was being sent, but not the content of the phone and emails, which obviously can be painted anyway. Details which agencies are able to access the data. There's just over 20, there's 21, and it was cut down from about 89 government agencies that could access this information. And all of these other things that now it gives the Parliamentary Joint Committee on Intelligence and Security the oversight of using metadata for agencies like ASIO and whatnot. Terrible stuff. And Sydney Morning Herald posted an article this morning saying that there's going to be 2,500 metadata cops across the country which will be able to sign off on the access to these metadata storage that we do have. And that's a frightening thing, that most of them are high senior police officers, especially in New South Wales. There was 900 senior officers that are allowed to sign off for this, and it just goes right to the core of what George Brandis and this Orwellian nightmare have wanted. So for those that want to know what it is and know the dangers and whatnot, check out my feature piece last week. But now that it's passed, there are ways to get around it, but on its basic level of not wanting things to be stored, all you have to do is use this is what they're trying to present, is all you have to do is go on a website that's hosted by an overseas server, so Facebook, Google, all of these things. This is what the government's trying to say, because they don't include under these laws specifically. But then you need to take into account that there is a Five Eyes Alliance that do share that data anyway, and it's an open web to be stored. And the only way that really can get around it, Anonymous Galactic from Brisbane have talked about VPNs, which are the virtual private networks where hide your data from ISPs, and it makes it look like you're accessing the web page from somewhere else, and it covers your tracks. But other than that, there's not too much that we can get through other than just making it harder for them, having a Hushmail account, all of these things that could be encrypted that makes it harder for them to store your blueprint. And I know I've been rambling on for a bit, but it's very important. And I hope to come back with a feature piece talking about in greater depth how we can defeat these new metadata retention laws that have been introduced and how we can get rid of them. I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, well, when you and I first started the show there, Ethan, we were basically watching in real time as this terror boogeyman was being used to justify a whole range of laws that were being passed, which take away our civil liberties and give the government more rights to do basically whatever they want. And now, episode 25, here we are. During the week, they've finally got through their metadata laws. So all three pieces that they wanted to get through, they've gotten through with bipartisan support. That is, the current Liberal government supported it. The current Labor so-called opposition supported it. If you still believe in the fake two-party paradigm, there's really not much hope for you. I'll throw to you there, Lindsay the Silver Fox.
Yeah, thanks. Look, I would love that, Ethan, because I speak to a lot of people and nobody really knows how to get around this. There's so much, I'd say bullshit is the word, relating to what's safe and what's not safe. I really would like some proper information on it if you can lay your hands on that. The other, you're talking about the two-party paradigm, but from my understanding, even the PUP, what do you call it, the Palmer United bloke, he even voted for it. So, I've sort of lost a bit of faith in them as well. That's about it. I'll throw back to you.
Tristan, what do you think about all of this?
I think it's interesting in combination with some of the other laws that they've been passing on network monitoring and things like that. For the live listeners, a few months ago they passed a bill where it allows you to basically monitor an undefined network, which by undefined I mean it could be any size. It used to be capped at a certain amount per network, but they've increased the amount to unlimited. And they've also changed the wording of what network means. And someone in Parliament actually asked, does this mean that you could effectively monitor the internet? And they said, well, yeah, but we're probably not going to do that. And that in combination with these data laws, it's 1-2 punch, I think. And yeah, look, I'm really interested to see what alternatives we can come out with. I think we might be able to take a leaf out of the Chinese book in the sense that a lot of their government does this sort of stuff to them. And a lot of them get through with VPNs and things like that. So we should reach out and work out a solution to combat these metadata laws. So do you, Johnno?
Well, I think we should have a broader discussion about the way that we use technology and methods and tactics that can be used if people want to try and get around surveillance. I guess for me, the way I see it is I'm just going to keep using the internet the way that I would anyway. I mean, there's too many of us doing too much work that if I just go about my day and use the technology the way I normally do, let them go through everything that I do. In fact, I'd kind of like that. I'd love it if someone in ASIO was sitting there watching everything that I do online and seeing the kind of material that I read, because then maybe he has to read it as well. I'd like him to listen to the podcast I listen to. He'd have to listen to them as well. I mean, they're not doing that, but I'd love it if they did, because maybe if they were exposed to some of the stuff that I'm reading, maybe they'd reconsider their job. Lindsay, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, but I don't think that's how it works. I think they'll just pick up on whatever you've done and they'll haul you in. That's what's worrying me. And then you get the thing where you're not allowed to let anybody know that you've been hauled in. All the other stuff. That's what's worrying me.
The police hauling me in, Lindsay, you'd never hear about it. You'd never dream of John LeBon spending time in a police watch house. We'll maybe discuss that on Sunday sessions. But look, this is a very important topic, Ethan. I'm going to give you the final word on it, then we'll have to press on.
Yeah, thanks, Johnno. I, as I said, I'm a bit shocked just because I expected to come back. I expected the Senate debates to go much longer than they did. So I didn't have anything in concrete prepared other than what I've already told you last week about what the laws do, the dangers, and what is to go from here. And I'll leave links at AusRoundtable.com, as we always do, to Anonymous Galactic and all of these people that are talking about VPNs. Scott Ludlam in Parliament giving a speech about what you can do to try and beat being stored, having your metadata stored on the defined legislative terms. beating the biggest surveillance grid that we have is a lot harder than that, almost impossible with the technology that we do have and that they do have. But on a legislative level, to beat it is not that hard if you really want to do it. So I definitely will come back eventually with some ways to beat it once I can get some research. But this really is the final nail in the coffin of three of the most draconian, just anti-free humanity legislative pieces that have gone through any parliament across the world. And if you want to know what the first two pieces of legislation entailed, head to episode 1, the very first episode of the Australian Roundtable Podcast. I go through there and I identify all of the things that are in the legislation and how they relate. You can maybe put the connections together about how, for example, as Tristan said, ASIO can cap and have an unlimited cap. The network's redefined now so they can tap the entire internet. Can't report on SIOs, but what better way to know if someone is reporting on SIOs than to have metadata retention? All of these things work together, and I think that this is just the beginning, because now that they've got this through so seamlessly, all these three pieces of legislation, I don't think Brandis is going to stop here, and I'll be here every week to try and update and try and keep everyone informed about new developments that are happening. But for now, unfortunately, metadata has passed, Johnno.
Yeah, and we're up to about 40 live listeners at the moment. The live chat's been terrific. Sol in the live chat says that the starting salary for an ASIO officer now is close to $80,000 a year. He saw it in a professional magazine. I haven't had time to double check that, but that wouldn't surprise me whatsoever. And that's good money in this day and age as a starting salary. And God knows there's plenty of people out there who will sell out their fellow brothers and sisters to get a job on the other side. And hey, if they're listening, boys, hope you're having a good day. Speaking of the live chat, we were talking a bit earlier about video games, and there were a few interesting comments in there. Rorschach said that someone should make a game where you can kill TV personalities and crisis actors. He says that he wants to shoot Grant Denyer. Robot Broken says that if in this game, if you shoot Noah, as in Noah Posner, he just comes back to life in another level. And Planetary Mirror says that the Link Cafe would be a level as well. Tori and Ken Johnson in the scope. And I've been watching the live chat. Haven't had a chance to read out too many comments, but the chat's been terrific tonight, guys. Keep it coming. I want to move on to the next topic now, guys. It's a little bit different to what we've been talking about. But this is one that I saw during the week, and it has to do, again, with what I would call cultural Marxism. Now, let me bring this one up. This is from The Age down in Melbourne, our second largest city, and it's on March 28, just yesterday actually, and it's entitled Legal Board Posts to Go to Women, ALP, that's one of our political parties here, to begin direct elections for state leader. And I'll just read out a short passage from the article, quote, at least half of all Victorian judges, magistrates and public board members must be women under a new government workplace equality commitment, drawing praise from unions and legal observers. Premier Daniel Andrews, in opening his first state Labor conference since winning the November election, said it was time for real action on the issue after seeing the number of women holding senior positions fall to around 36% in recent years. Half of all future appointments to paid government boards and the courts during the rest of his term in government must now be women, he said, turning Labor's past aspirational target into a firm commitment. I'm sick of walking into meetings and seeing a room full of blokes sitting around the table, he told hundreds of ALP delegates gathered at the Moonee Valley Racecourse. This is a step forward for our state. Public institutions that actually represent the public. It means balance. It means better decisions, end quote. And the article just goes on like that. So the rub of this is that they're going to mandate now that at least half of positions as they come up for hiring are given to women as part of their government directive in Victoria, our second largest state here in Australia. I think their population is like 5 or 6 million now. So we're talking about a significant state now saying minimum of 50% women. I'll throw straight to you there, Lindsay. What do you think about this?
Yeah, well, I'm just sitting here thinking about it when you were talking, and I'm thinking, well, what happens when they mandate that at least 25% have got to be Aboriginal? Does that mean that 25% has to be split in two so that you've got 50% male Aboriginal, 50% female Aboriginal? And where does this all end? And what happens to the overall intellectual capacity when you're not employing people on merit, but employing them on, I was going to say something rude about whether they've got a spout or whatever. Where does it end, and what will it do to our society in the long term? That's my concern. I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, and what happens to the women who've already, by merit, achieved places in these boardrooms or as judges or what have you? What happens to them? I mean, all of their work now gets tainted because in the future, when people know that 50% of these people have to be women, the ones who would have got there anyway will be tarred with the same brush of the ones who just got there because they happen to be women. Ethan, what say you?
Yeah, I completely agree. And just reinforcing what Lindsay said, I think it's obviously by design, but they're taking out a lot of birds with the same stone here, where not only are they pushing the cultural Marxism agenda that we know and we've spoke about here on the show before, but they are also using this as a way to, just destroy companies and destroy the economy and collapse us further into debt and whatnot. Because, as Lindsay said, if you're hiring people just because of a statistic or just because of this false ideology that it means better if we have more equality in the workplace rather than based on skill, that's a terrible thing. It could lead to terrible things for companies, as it has in the past with a lot of case studies that I used to do at school when we were talking about gender equality in the workplace and all of these cultural Marxist subjects that we had to do back at school. And if you're doing that, I think they're taking out a lot of birds with one stone here, where they're pushing a lot of agendas. And because the people are so brainwashed, they believe that this is a positive and a good thing, and they'll continue on with it, Johnno.
Yeah, I'd just like to read out one of the commenters in the live chat. Trevor Ware says, hey, what happened to being hired based on merit? And I think that's a really good point. I wouldn't call it mandate now, I'd call it will mandate, because that's pretty much what they're doing here. And yeah, the points you're making about cultural Marxism is very prevalent in today, and you can see like this in combination with some of the topics we were talking about earlier, feminism and bringing that to the table and just pushing these things down our throats from every angle, and we can't breathe. And look, I'm actually personally, I take this personally. I don't know about you guys, but yeah, I'm not happy about this, Johnno.
Yeah, look, I was fortunate enough to spend 6 months in South Africa a few years ago, during the World Cup, actually, that same year, 2010. And in South Africa, it is the policy, it works like this. Black woman, black man, white woman, white man. That's the order in which you're supposed to hire as part of government-mandated policy. So if you're a white man, you're literally last on the list. If you're up against a whole other bunch of applicants and you're all roughly similar in merit, you're the last one to get a job, you won't get a job. Simple as that. And in many cases, you'll be far more qualified or far more able than some of your peers, but because they happen to be black or female or a black female, the combination, you won't get the job, and that's government policy. And so the people out there who might support this kind of thing, saying, no, we should mandate for women because it's too hard for them to get these jobs in the first place. Well, let's just follow this line of thinking through. Would you be comfortable with mandating like they do in South Africa? Black woman, black man, white woman, white man. Is that the kind of society that you want, where you mandate who can and can't get jobs, who should and shouldn't get jobs? And if you're comfortable with that, how do you think it's going to end up when you say that white men should be the last ones to get positions, which historically they've been the best at, they've been the ones who've done that? Whether you think it's a biological thing, a cultural thing, it doesn't matter. If you're saying that the people who right now are dominating these positions should be the last to get that position, where do you think we'll end up? Tristan, what say you?
Yeah, I think this ties in with this immigration that's happening, and I think I hypothesize that potentially in the future they're going to start saying, you need to have a minimum amount of Chinese people in your workforce, or you need to have a minimum amount of Indian people in your workforce. And then, as you point out on South Africa and whatever, that might actually start happening here. You might actually have us going to a lower ranks, and they will come up with these news stories about how these people are more intelligent than us, and we need to give way to a more balanced society. So, yeah, I think we'll see in the future immigration playing a part in Australia and these mandated laws.
Well, I'll tell you what, Greg Williams in the live chat says, hey, Johnno, how is your woman on the moon plan going? And I don't know if I've told you guys about this, but just the other day I came up with a new plan to use this feminism nonsense to our advantage. There's never been a woman put on the moon. Of course, there's never been anybody put on the moon.
Outrageous.
But even the official story says there's never been a woman on the moon. So I can see a way to kill a couple of birds with two stones here. Right. Let's get all of the feminazis, which even a lot of men today are indoctrinated into being feminazis. I don't really like that word, but that's because I don't really like the use of the word Nazi in that kind of derogatory way. But this feminism nonsense, this second wave feminism, cultural Marxism nonsense, let's use it to our advantage and start a campaign to get a woman put on the moon, because I think until a woman's been on the moon, there won't be any gender equality whatsoever. Lindsay, what say you?
Yeah, no, I agree. One other point I'd like to make, we haven't discussed it before, but if you go through the statistics of who attend university courses, you'll be quite surprised at, like, some courses like dentistry and electrical engineering or what have you, they can have up to 90% Asians in those courses in some universities. Now, my way of looking at it was, down the line, they're all going to be middle management or upper management. There's going to be this inequality, not just gender, but general inequality right through our society. I think we need to be addressing that as well. I mean, this is not instead of, but as well as what we've just discussed about gender equality.
Yeah, well, that's a broader discussion. I think we'll get into that later on when you talk about the protocols. Ethan, I want to give you a chance to get your word in here. What do you think about a country where we're mandating 50% positions, minimum, by the way? They didn't say 50% exactly, they said minimum. What do you think about 50% minimum of positions from the government, in these cases, going to women?
No, it's terrible, Johnno. And as both Tristan, yourself, and Lindsay have brought up some fantastic points about how this is just the beginning. It's just the beginning, because eventually this whole disguise of multiculturalism, which is, you know, we can talk about what the agendas are behind that, but they're pushing this agenda not only as a way to indoctrinate people, but as a way to also just destroy these companies in the physical, destroy our company. Because if you need to have a certain amount of Asians or a certain amount of people of ethnicity or a certain amount of male and female and all of this nonsense, it's gonna have devastating effects, not just on the country, but on the individual level, on the the company level, small business, large business, and it's only going to get worse from here, because this is just the beginning. Because once they pass this, they've got a sniff, and they'll continue on, in my opinion, Johnno.
Yeah, look, I think a lot of younger people probably don't realise just how far this political correctness has gone. And I'm another Aussie in the live chat mentioned the political correctness. He says that was the end of freedom. He's quite right. I'm only in my 20s, and yet when I was a kid, when I would go to my dad's workplace, because we used to go there every now and then, on a Friday night when he was having, knock-off drinks with his workmates, which I'm sure some places still do, there were calendars there with topless women, like topless women calendars at the workplace. Now, could you imagine having topless women calendars in a workplace today? You wouldn't hear about it. You'd get fired for it. You'd probably make the headlines for it if you did it. And I'm only in my 20s. That's how far we've come. Now, some people might say, oh, it's a good thing that we don't have topless calendars in the workplace anymore. It's a good thing, blah, blah, blah. Well, no one at my father's workplace seemed to have a problem with it. You know what I mean? And you might say, oh, maybe they had a problem with it. They just weren't saying anything. Is it possible that maybe once upon a time people didn't worry about this nonsense in the first place? They were focused on far more important things. Is it possible that we've been so conditioned into political correctness that we see everything through that prism, that we worry about things that people didn't used to worry about? Lindsay, we do have to move on, but I always love getting your opinions on these things. Is it possible that we've come so far so quickly, a lot of people have no idea just what's really going on?
Yeah, I agree entirely. Yeah, I've sort of come through some of it, and I just know that my father's generation, they came through even more. So we've seen it change. A lot of us are not happy about it, but the same thing that you fellas are suffering. You open your mouth, and somebody's going to jump down your throat. I'll give an example. Here a number of years ago, I was talking to these people, and this woman was very embarrassed because she was in Wales on a holiday, and there was this male Welsh choir was singing, and an Australian woman came up and complained afterwards that there were no women in the male Welsh choir, and this other woman was embarrassed that, God Almighty, I'm an Australian, and here's this ratbag. But that's the sort of crap that's been going on for a very, very long time, and it's just getting worse. Okay, I'll throw back to you.
I think it's a double-edged sword. It's part of destroying our society the way that we know it, getting rid of what I would call white Western culture, getting rid of just culture in general. It's not just happening to us, it's happening the world over. That's one aspect of it, but they're also getting people to, instead of focusing on the real problems, like corrupt governments, economies that are on the brink of collapse, wars that could be around the corner any moment, instead of people focusing on what's really going on and trying to address it, they're focused on trivial stuff like the calendars in somebody's workplace. It's a double-edged sword. They're getting us to worry about trivial stuff. It takes our minds off the real stuff, and it gets us focusing on things that will cause us to argue with one another, our brothers and sisters, about stuff that's essentially trivial. Now, we've got a lot of topics to get through. We're already an hour into the show. We do have to press on. Ethan, I know you've got a couple of topics, so I'll let you pick one of them and take it away. Oh, before you do, by the way, in the live chat, Greg Williams says that I think it's about time Australia has a gay Muslim leader. The US has one, and I think we're lagging behind. And look, a lot of our listeners won't be too familiar with some of these theories, but a lot of our listeners will. So, Greg, I'll tell you what, this Greg Williams guy, we'll have to get him on the show because he's had a few pearlers today. Ethan, I'll let you take away the next topic, mate, and make sure you give us the title of it as well.
Cheers, Johnno. Appreciate that. I've only got a couple of small topics here that I wanted to expand into a general chat. The first one has to do with Steve Marsh, who was an organic farmer who had his field contaminated in Western Australia by his former friend Michael Baxter, who had genetically modified canola, which spread across his organic farm, and they've been in a court battle where Steve Marsh lost, and now he's doing an appeal in the Western Australian Supreme Court. So I'll just read out this article just to give a better background than I have so far. Supporters of organic farmer Steve Marsh have turned up at a Western Australian court to back him in his fight against GM contamination. This is by perthnow.com.au. In May last year, Mr. Marsh failed in his bid to sue former friend Michael Baxter, claiming he lost organic certification for more than half of his farm after genetically modified canola drifted onto his land from Mr. Baxter's neighbouring property. Mr. Marsh is appealing the judgment, with the hearing set to start in the WA Supreme Court on Monday. If his appeal is unsuccessful, he faces a bill for legal costs almost $804,000. Now, General Maddox at realnewsaustralia.com, one of our leading alternative news sites here in Australia, has been following Steve Marsh for a while, the case over there. And if any of our listeners are not too familiar, if they're in Western Australia, you need to show this guy support, because here's someone who, and for people that aren't aware, genetically modified crops, if they're put next to normal crops or organic crops, they have this thing where I don't have the exact details in front of me to actually tell you why it happens, but genetically modified food can take over. It creeps in amongst all of the roots and whatnot, and eventually contaminates anything that is organic or is natural around it, as it happens, as it expands and grows. And this is what happened to Steve Marsh. And although this happened, although that all of the court costs and all of the evidence in court suggested that, yes, he did lose his organic certification because his farm was contaminated by genetically modified crops, he is still lost, and now he's appealing it, and it's going to cost him almost $1 million if he doesn't win this. Yet Michael Baxter, who is the gentleman that has the canola on his farm, he is refusing to reveal where he gets his funding from, and has been supported by some of these pro-Monsanto lobbyist groups that we have here in Australia. So this is a major case that is going on, not just because of Steve Marsh personally, but on a lower level and on a larger level to some extent. This is about this is going to set a precedent for the man, the Aussie bloke, the farmer, the individual in Australia fighting against these massive corporations and this Monsanto genetically modified nightmare, which is taking over the planet, especially here in Australia, where we've got a number of test grounds, we've got food rolling out onto the shelves, especially wheat, all the trials everywhere. This is going to set a precedent, because if Steve Marsh doesn't win, people need to show their support, because this is someone who has become a victim of these corporations destroying his farm, destroying his livelihood, and they are going to be completely immune to it. And I just wanted to open that up for a general discussion. I'll throw to you first, Lindsay, just about this case in general. If you've heard of it, what are your thoughts on it if you haven't, and just to a general discussion about genetically modified organisms and what you think of them.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. I saw something. My mother was watching television the other night, and this was on, I'm not sure whether it was Four Corners or Australian Story or something like that. Now, as it turned out, I had to leave, but I only heard a little bit of it. But I know what you're talking about.
Time, so we'll have to do it. Oh, sorry. I thought we were on mute there. I'm very sorry, Lindsay. I thought we were on mute. We're just discussing what we're going to do for the rest of the show. We're running out of time. I'll throw back to you there, mate. Very sorry about that. Okay,
no, that's all right. So I heard a little bit about it, and I agree with you. It's just Monsanto all over. They do it all over the world. There are a number of books that I've got that discuss all this. Something came across my computer just this week about somebody in Spain or Portugal, I just can't remember which, who was eating something as an inane like bread that had genetically modified products that had fish genes in it, and he got an allergic reaction to fish and died. Now, no, I'd never even heard of that before, but apparently that the hospital had no problem in confirming that that's why he died. It was from a fish allergy. So I don't think people realise just what's in it, and it worries me now that they're even using human genes in some of these things. That concerns me. Now, as far as this man having this huge bill, I know that our mate Mark that we've spoken about with the bills of exchange, discharging these debts through bills of exchange, he's done some courses in Perth. So perhaps if anybody's listening from Perth that have done the courses or know somebody's done the course, they could get them to assist this man in discharging this debt using these bills of exchange. I'll throw that back to you now.
Yeah, Lindsay, that's fantastic advice. You are right. I threw it to you because I knew you could offer some solutions to say that how he can get around this debt and this corrupt court system, as we have spoken about on the show and privately before. And even this week, ironically, this week, it come out that even the World Health Organization have said that that Monsanto, a number of the ingredients that they are using. For those who don't understand, Monsanto developed Agent Orange in Vietnam, and now they want to control the world's food resources, which they're spraying with the same chemicals. For those who don't have a background on it, it's absolute madness when you reveal this to people. Yeah, the World Health Organization said that a number of ingredients within a lot of their crops have been linked to causing cancer, and Monsanto have come out and just refused it and said, look at the evidence on our website, blah blah blah, we're going to be appealing this. And that's going to be an even greater precedent, because if the World Health Organization can come out and say this is not good, your food is causing cancer, it's doing all these things that have been proven in numerous studies. There's over 112 studies by one person alone speaking about the dangers of genetically modified organisms. If even the World Health Organization is going to come out, and if they get away with that, if they just turn around and make them retract their statements based on, whatever they're going to appeal it on, that sets a precedent that Monsanto is one of the most powerful organizations in the world that we really need to stop, because it's not like all of these things that control every facet of our life. They want to control our food. They're here in Australia. Our livelihood is our food, and they want to control that. They want to destroy the farming industry. They want to destroy everything even more. And this case over Steve Marsh, I'll leave a link at AusRoundtable.com. Steve Marsh's trial right now is of one man standing up against this and saying we're not going to take it. So I'll keep everyone updated on that. But before we do, I'll throw that to you, Tristan. Any thoughts on anything I've discussed?
Look, I'll be honest, man. I'm not too familiar with the GMO side of things. I haven't really got much to say. I'll throw it to you, Johnny.
Look, I think this topic is a very important one. Clearly from the comments in the live chat, this is something that people want us to talk about more, Ethan. We probably don't have too much time to go into a discussion today because we are already way behind schedule. So what I'll do is I'll give you the final thought on this topic today, and we'll make sure that next week we give this the attention it deserves.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I would look forward to doing a feature piece just speaking about genetically modified organisms, their origins, their history, the corporate influences behind it, and what they what they are trying to push with these agendas. In June, I believe it is, we're marching against Monsanto again all around Australia. There's going to be a March Against Monsanto rallies, which have been some of the biggest in recent years that we've seen, especially here in Brisbane at Redcliffe Place there. So I'll keep everyone updated on that, and I'll definitely come back to speak about this, because I have been reading the chat, and it's obviously a hot topic, because as it should be, everyone needs to care about this, because it's not a sovereign thing. This is completely global. This is a takeover of our food. This is a takeover of our crops. It's just really mind-boggling stuff when you look into it. So I'll come back with that, but for now, just head to AusRoundtable.com if you're hearing this on the official upload, and look at the case of Steve Marsh. I'll give a lot of links so you can follow his whole story, and I'll keep you updated on his journey in the Supreme Court.
Thanks, Led. And again, AusRoundtable.com, that's AUSRoundtable.com. For every single episode that we do, you'll find not only the official MP3 upload, which you can download from that page via Podbean, you'll also find the video, the official upload for YouTube, and you'll find all of the links to the source material and other reference material that you might be interested in checking out to further educate yourself on these topics. That's AusRoundtable.com. Please do check it out. Now, we have to move on, guys. So I know we want to talk about coal seam gas. Lindsay, we'll save that one for next week because we're running out of time. Ethan, I know you wanted to talk about the national regulatory body. We have to talk about that one next week because we're just out of time. We've got time for just one more topic for this segment, and it makes a nice segue into international, which is why I'm going to keep it. And this is an article that I saw once again in Fairfax, the Age down in Melbourne, and of course Sydney Morning Herald in Sydney. And this was an article from March 26, a few days ago, by a lady named Ruby Hamad, and it's entitled, "Why Are Australian Ads So White?" And I'll read out a portion from the article, quote, "When US writer and academic Roxanne Gay visited our fair shores recently, she noticed a glaring difference between Australia and her own country. How much whiter our media is. Commercials are not very diverse here. It makes US commercials look like the promised land," she tweeted. I want to read that one again. "Commercials are not very diverse here." Just keep that one in mind. Gay later expanded on ABC Radio, that's our national broadcaster. "It seems as though people of colour are completely erased from commercials, as if they're not part of the consumer public," she said, and that's troubling. Given the US is still far from coming to terms with its own shocking racial history, and that much of the population remains indifferent to the way this history lives on in structural inequality, Gay's assessment is pretty damning indeed. I've already written about the lack of racial diversity in certain Australian television programs, comparing them to their US counterparts, which some may have been surprised to learn are far more inclusive. Of course, as Gay rightly noted, this discrepancy extends beyond the televised programs themselves and into the corporate advertising that sustains them. This means our television shows and the commercials inserted between and throughout them are overwhelmingly white. What does that say about us in terms of how we see ourselves as a nation and in terms of how we view people of colour?" End quote. And the article just goes on and on like that. So what they're saying once again is that we're too white, we're not diverse enough. Lindsay, I'll throw straight to you.
Yes. Well, what can I say about that? We were called the White Australia policy right up until certain people leaned on our politicians to do away with it. So what do they expect? Now, they've only got to wait another 20 or 30 years and, you know, most of the diehards will die off and then they'll have it all to themselves. And you fellas will be lumbered with it. So what can you say to somebody like that? That's almost like that horrible Jewish woman on the YouTube video who says, "Oh, the whole of Europe is going to have to get used to the fact that they're going to be multicultural. They're going to object to the Jews for forcing this on them, but that's just the way it is." You know, you
The lady
horrible.
you're referring to there, Lindsay, is Barbara Spector, and again, we'll provide a link to that on our episode 25 page at AusRoundtable.com. You have to see this video to believe it. In fact, if I had it handy, I'd play it right now for listeners. But Barbara Spector, in a couple of minutes, and she's a leading member of a certain body in Sweden, I believe. She says quite plainly that the Jews want, this is her words, not mine, that the Jews want and are going to play a large role in making Europe more multicultural and less monolithic, that they're going to ensure that there are more people from other cultures and races and colours and what have you going to Europe. It has to happen. Europe won't survive without it. And because the Jews are leading it, that they're going to be resented for it. But it has to happen anyway. Those are her words, not mine. That's Barbara Spector. You have to hear this to understand they're telling us what they're doing. And I know we're going to speak more about this later on in the show, Lindsay, but this idea that Australia isn't diverse enough as it is, and you say that we'll have to put up with this in the future, I'll give you an example of how I put up with it yesterday. I went to catch a bus into Brews Brothers. I wanted a few frothies for yesterday. There were some celebrations going on. And I went to jump on the bus, and this was early in the bus route between where I live and the city. So early in the bus route, I couldn't get on. There was not enough room, and the bus was literally full of Asian people, no word of a lie. Now, I live near a university, and many of these kids are here studying at university. They're not necessarily going to be long-term stays, but even our universities are absolutely chock full of Asians. We're conditioned now from a young age to believe that anyone who questions this is a racist. But you tell me who's racist, the people questioning why white nations are becoming more and more so-called diverse, or the people who are trying to get rid of white countries and make them diverse? Ethan, I'll throw to you.
Yeah, I completely agree, Johnno, and I have similar examples of just how that happens even down in my areas, not necessarily in the major city like you are, but it's still as prevalent down here as it is up there on buses, public transport, everywhere. And just this, referring back to last week, this destruction of language, this destruction of meaning, manipulating us into believe that questioning is the wrong thing, that certain barriers we shouldn't cross because we believe that those barriers are there protect us, or those barriers are there because they're meant to be there. And just the fact that you can't question, well, why have we seen such a drastic transformation over all of these years where all of these multiculturalism expansion has come to Australia and almost taken over? You know, it's everywhere now, and to read rubbish articles like this is completely ridiculous. Lindsay, you were someone who has seen this develop over the years from its inception. I'm interested to get your thoughts on just your personal perspective of what you've witnessed with multiculturalism on a larger scale.
Yeah, well, I can remember being in a country town in New South Wales. This might be 20, 25, 30 years ago, and going to Sydney, and I was absolutely shocked because, of course, country centres were basically white. You might have, a Chinese restaurant, or you might have the Greek cafe in most country towns, things like this. But basically, they were a white settlement, and Aboriginals quite often were there as well. But when you went to Sydney, suddenly I was on buses or trains or even walking down the street, and I'd be flat out listening to somebody speaking English, and it absolutely shocked me. I thought, man, I had no idea we were this far advanced. Well, now, like you're saying, it's even worse now.
Well, let me add some meat to what you just said with some statistics here. This is from migrationpolicy.org, a non-profit. This is a legitimate source, and I'll give the links at ausroundtable.com. Quote, over a quarter of all Sydney-siders speak a language other than English at home. The most common are Chinese and Arabic. As part of this greater linguistic diversity, Sydney is also the state capital with the highest proportion, 6%, of its population not fluent in English. So let me just break that down for you again. 6%, that's 1 in 16 people in Sydney can't even speak English, and 27% of people in Sydney speak a language other than English at home. More than a quarter speak a language other than English at home. Now, there's nothing wrong with speaking a language other than English. The issue is that if more than a quarter are speaking a language other than English at home, that gives you an idea of just how flooded Australia has become with immigrants. And I'll give you some more statistics. People say, oh, but aren't most of because we have mass immigration in this country, like 200,000 people here, it's incredible. And we have people say, oh, but aren't most of those immigrants from white countries? Well, you tell me. From July 2012 to June 2013, settler arrivals, so not just tourists or whatever, but people who are coming here to stay, by country of birth, and this is from immigration.gov. So this is the government's own statistics. The top one, New Zealand, 27,000 arrivals. But remember, New Zealand, that includes all the Polynesians who get New Zealand passports, right? So that's not 27,000 white New Zealanders, that's many of them. I would even argue, because where I work, I deal a lot with immigrants. I'd argue that could be majority Polynesian. I am trying to find the statistics on that, but for the time being, let's just go with New Zealand, number 1, 27,000. India, number 2, 18,000, and that's an increase of 30% from the year before. Number 3 is China, and that excludes Taiwan, 18,000. Number 4 is the UK, 11,000, but that's down 30%. Number 5 is the Philippines. Number 6 is South Africa. 7 Malaysia, 8 Vietnam, 9 Sri Lanka. Do you notice any common theme there? Asia. Asia, Asia, Asia. And what's more, the white countries, or the seemingly white countries, New Zealand and the UK, they're down 10% and 30% respectively. So you tell me, who's the racist here? Is it people like me who question what's happening to white countries, or is it people who are clearly trying to get rid of the white people in the white countries? Tristan, I'll throw to you.
Oh, it's just an example of watering down another white country. It's happening all over the world and all the other 6 eyes and whatnot, well, except for Israel, of course. And this is just another example of media propaganda to promote that cause and make people, the public, think it's their own idea. I mean, I know personally that all of my friends, people I associate with, are definitely for this whole immigration thing and for this Marxist bull BS. And it's very hard to bring these subjects up with people because you get brought across as, some people joke and say, what are you, a KKK or something like that? And that's literally what people have said to me when I brought this white nationalism thing up. And it's sad that you can't have any pride for your own nation, because we do have a nation. We are not guilty. I mean, the crimes of our forefathers were of our forefathers. They had nothing to do with us as individuals. I mean, I didn't go over and invade other countries. And I feel that a lot of people put an unjustified...
Tristan, let's take a step back. I hate to interrupt you there, but What crimes of the forefathers? You and I were trained at school to believe that white men came to this country and did all these despicable, terrible things. That's what we're trained to believe. But how much evidence they actually give us about this? And I'll give you another example. Many of our listeners are in North America, and they're taught white guilt because of the slave trade, right? The black slaves. You go and do research, get some actual improved evidence into how many white people owned slaves back then, even in the South. Find out how many white people actually owned the slaves at the time, and then ask yourself, should we cast an aspersion against all white people of that time for the small percentage of people who owned slaves? And even if you want to do that, does that mean that 200 years later, people should still be feeling guilty because they're white? When in any other situation is it okay to train people to feel guilty for their skin? None. Only white people. Lindsay, what say you?
Yeah, I agree with you. And when you're talking about the slaves, I've got some books I'll probably put on a shared site for people. To do who were the slave owners and who were the importers. Most of them were our friends again, who won't have these same people in their own country in Israel. So there's a long history of them as being the slave traders. There were my understanding anyway is that there were things passed in Parliament in the southern states to export the slaves back to a country in Africa, and they were forbidden to do that by the British king, because he was beholden to certain slave owners. So there's so much of this goes on. You're talking about what we've done, or you come back to the same point about you're not allowed to speak your mind, and there's a whole lot of different books and what have you, trying to get that through to us. Speak up. Don't be intimidated by these people. That's their stock in trade. They've been doing it for a long time. They intimidate you. They call you a racist. They call you anti-Semitic. Right. Well, first of all, say, well, how do you define racist? And find out whether they know even what they're talking about. I tried looking it up in the dictionary and I couldn't get a definition of racist. What exactly do you mean by it? And then you'll find that every other group in the world is a racist as well. We've got to put a stop to this domination of our language and silencing us for what we know is our own self-defense. All right, I'll throw it back to you.
Yeah, I appreciate all of that, Lindsay, and we're up to 46 people watching live, and from the live chat I can tell that most of our listeners seem to support us talking about these things, and I can assure you from now on I'm going to be talking about these things more and more often because someone has to, and it amazes me that no one says that Asia's too Asian or that Africa's too African, but somehow white countries are too white. And we started this topic because I was talking about, in a mainstream publication, somebody saying that our ads are too white, that there's not enough diversity. And the more you look into this for yourself, and again, I'll provide plenty of links on our website for you to do your own research, you'll come to realize that diversity is just a code word for white genocide. And I know that sounds very controversial. You can't call it a genocide. It's the white people who genocide everybody else. Yeah, I know that's what they teach you, but look at what is actually happening. Australia, New Zealand, Canada, especially Britain, and even the United States, they're being flooded with people who aren't white. Now, there's nothing wrong with not being white. There's also nothing right with the countries who are already not white. Japan, if someone said to me that we should flood Japan with Asians, whites, and Africans, I'd say no, that's wrong. You're trying to destroy Japan. It's obvious. Same thing's happening to the white countries, and only white countries. Each and every white country on the planet, and only the white countries are being told that they have to be more diverse, and that's why it's so obvious that diversity is just a code word for white genocide. When there are Chinese flooding into Tibet, people call that a genocide in Tibet. But when we have Asians flooding into white countries, people don't want to use the word genocide. Well, that's what I'm going to do from now on. I'm going to call it what it is because I've done the research. It's obvious what's happening. There's a white genocide taking place, and if we don't wake up to that soon, we're going to run out of time. But we do have to move on to the next topic, and it makes a nice little segue for us there, Lindsay, and that is to talk about, this is the international segment now, the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. Now, you've got a big piece for us. It is lengthy. I want the listeners to stick with us and try and pay attention to what you're saying because it's very important. It is lengthy, but this has to be said. Now, we've been putting this topic off for a little while, and I think it's about time that we did address it properly because it is a fundamentally important topic. So with all of that said, Lindsay, I'll let you take it away.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it'd have to be at least a month, maybe 6 weeks ago, during question time, after a live chat, I was asked about the protocols of the learned elders of Zion. And at the time, I could only give a perfunctory answer. We were running out of time. But I've now looked through my books and pamphlets and things, and I would like to expand upon that reply. Now, it is very long, but please bear with me. From an Australian Zionist Christian booklet written in 1984 and published by the Vineyard, that's in quotes, with one of the main contributors having a Jewish-sounding name called ZVI Ben Avraham, and I'll quote him, "What do the protocols purport to be? Enemies of the Jewish people claim that they constitute, quote, a report delivered in 24 sessions, end of quote, of the alleged Supreme Council of World Jewry. They give expression to an alleged Jewish plot to subvert and conquer all the nations of the world. These Jewish plans are supposed to have been contrived in August 1897, end of quote." Now, and then he's got please note the date. And then he quotes further, at the first Zionist Congress summoned by Theodor Herzl in Basel. And what we ask is a conspiracy to which the protocols are supposed to give expression, nothing less than the subjugation and control of the whole world. And this, if it be necessary, by the most violent, cruel and crafty methods, through deep and intricate schemes by which all mankind is to be subverted. This is still quoting him. It is here that the symbolic serpent, quite fictitious of course, is introduced. As the serpent insinuates itself into the bosom of the various states, it gnaws and eats away all non-Jewish political forces through constitutional liberalism and economic upheavals. And to achieve their end, they now cunningly inculcate such a dreadful idea as, quote, equality of all citizens before the law, liberty of conscience and religion, freedom of the press, compulsory school attendance, universal suffrage, constitutional government, end of quote, etc., etc. Such pleasing notions lead to socialism and anarchy and bring about the ruin of nations. Were these accusations made against any other group than the Jews, they would collapse under the weight of their own imbecility, end of quote. And then another quote, one wonders if the hand of a just and vindicating God is not seen in the simple circumstances which led to the exposure of the protocol's forgery. Here are the details. Early in August 1921, Mr. Philip Graves, at the time Constantinople correspondent of the London Times, received from a white Russian exile a small book in a damaged condition. Turning it over, Mr. Graves saw a sentence which he recognised as being identical with the one appearing in the protocols. Yet this French book had the word Joli, J-O-L-I, on the half-torn page. Securing a copy of the protocols, Mr. Graves compared the two. To his amazement, he found the protocols repeating not only whole sentences and paragraphs, but whole pages of the much earlier book of Joly. However, in the work of Joly, instead of we the Jews, it was the emperor. Yes, investigation revealed that Nilus had made a clumsy verbatim plagiarism from a long-forgotten essay published in 1864 in Brussels by a Parisian lawyer, Maurice Joly. The basic layer, then, of the protocol onion has a satire directed against Napoleon III entitled Dialogue in Hell between Machiavelli and Montesquieu, and it had nothing whatsoever to do with Jews. Sergei Nilus had plagiarized it to compose his protocols, end of quote. Then there's another quote. Trial began in Bern in October the 29th, 1934. The plaintiffs being Dr. J. Dreyfus Brodsky, Dr. Marcus Cohen, and Dr. Marcus Ehrenpreis. The evidence given at the Bern trial revealed another source of Nilus plagiarism, a fantasy novel entitled Biarritz and written by the German novelist Goetzke. I think that's how you pronounce it. He wrote under the name of Sir John Radcliffe in Berlin. Dr. J. Staniek had demonstrated the similarity. Section verbatim had been lifted bodily from the protocols to bolster up the fable of a conspiracy to undermine Christianity. Now, that's the end of the quote. These vineyard people then complain that the protocols lay out a master plan to enslave the world, and give a few outrageous extreme examples which they hope will persuade us what an infamous book this is. These are their examples. 1, our right lies in force, and that's the quote from the protocols they use. 2, the administrators whom we shall choose from among the public have strict regard to their capacity for servile obedience. Will not be persons trained in the arts of government, and will therefore easily become pawns in our game in the hands of men of learning and genius who will be our advisors. And number 3, the press which with a certain exceptions that may be disregarded, is already entirely in our hands. Okay, so that's the section from this Zionist Christian publication. Now, to balance this, I have some more quotes from another Jew called Henry H. Klein, and then in his article he's got copyright 1946. Now, once again, this is a long article, so I've picked the sections which I consider to be most relevant out of it. And I'll quote, "Why is a knowledge of the contents of the protocols important now? Because they outline a detailed plan of the destruction of the Christian world and for its conquest and control by a handful of Jews known as the Sanhedrin, and because most of it has already been accomplished. All that is left to complete the conquest is for the Sanhedrin to openly declare its power over all the governments. The first step towards completing the conquest was taken when the United States Congress adopted the so-called United Nations Charter, which created the world super government outlined in the protocols. Next step will be taken when other nations do the same thing and provide military forces for the so-called Security Council created by the Charter to oppress and suppress the peoples of all nations. When this is done, the rulership of the Sanhedrin over the world will be complete. The United States, Great Britain and Russia are already under Sanhedrin control, though the people of these nations do not know it." Now, please remember, this was written about 1946, so some of those things might be out of context in today. I will continue with a quote. "The Sanhedrin today consists of more than 70 men. Walter Rapnau, who was said to have been the richest and most influential Jew in Germany before he was murdered in 1922, is quoted as having said that 300 men rule the world, and each one knows the other. Benjamin Disraeli, the only Jew to be Prime Minister of Great Britain, said in his book Coningsby, published nearly 100 years ago, that the world is ruled by men other than those the people think. Now, if the Sanhedrin is the power that has ruled the world during the past 50 years, then everything that has transpired during that time is understood. It is in accordance with the plan outlined in the protocols that both revolutions, 1905 and 1917, occurred in Russia, that we've had 2 world wars, that the stock markets of the world collapsed in 1929, that we had world anti-Semitism, and that we have now have the greatest threat of world revolution by the blatant fake socialist Harold J. Lasky of London, the PAL, PAL of Felix Frankfurter, who says that revolution will come to the United States. The Sanhedrin then is only another name for the learned elders of Zion, who are implementing all the steps in the program outlined in the protocols. The Jews as a whole know nothing about this program, nor do they know anything about the Sanhedrin. The Rothschilds were behind it from the beginning. They backed Herzl. The Rockefellers and others of great wealth in all countries followed suit." Further quoting him, "I realize the extent of the Sanhedrin madness, but I represented as counsel one of the defendants in the so-called sedition trial in Washington, D.C. during 1944. In the first paper that I filed in court for my client in January 1944, I intimated that the prosecution originated in the brain of British-minded, I've lost that section, sorry, on September the 18th, 1931, in a small quantity of, I apologise for this, something's happened and I've just jumped down to, here we are, okay. It originated in the mind of Felix Frankfurter. It was Frankfurter who kept Roosevelt under control to do the Sanhedrin bidding. Roosevelt had no choice. He had too many Panamas, and that was in brackets financial scandals, and dark stains in his career. And the protocols say that the only persons with dark stains or Panamas in their lives will be selected for high public office, so that they can be kept under control if they refuse to follow orders. My 18 charges for Roosevelt's impeachment, which were before Congress since January the 23rd, 1943, were not acted upon because of the influence of Barney Baruch over Congress. Baruch's influence extends to the army and navy also. Why have all the machinations of the Sanhedrin succeeded in the face of so-called free press? No daily newspaper in the United States is free from Sanhedrin control, nor is any large magazine or book publisher. 25 years ago, the publishers of Putnam wanted to publish the protocols. They were firmly reminded that if they did so, they would be forced out of business and ruined. It was a capital offence in Russia under Kerensky in 1917 to own a copy. The Sanhedrin money gang controls the radio and movies, and no person can get on the air unless he is right, and no picture can be exhibited unless approved. We must keep anti-Semitism alive, say the protocols, even though we sacrifice some of our own people. And that's the end of the quote from Mr. Klein. Mr. Klein goes on at length about the threats he suffered to his health and life from various Jewish sources. Quote, not only was I threatened, but 3 attempts were made to knock me off physically during the past 2 years, and many attempts were made to poison me. Not only was I threatened with death and ostracized by my family, but I was even read out of the Jewish ranks by self-important Jews such as Rabbi Stephen S. Wise in New York, and by others who presumed to own Jews. His, Wise, weekly publication, Congress Weekly, published an article characterizing me as a modern renegade, like Johann Pfefferkorn, who a few hundred years ago, according to the article, became a Christian and betrayed Jewish secrets. I didn't know the Jews had secrets. I thought everything was open above board. If these secrets are the protocols, then I can understand. That is the end of the quotations. Mr. Klein is no doubt about the validity of the aims of the protocols, and he appears from other sources to have done the things he claims in his article. I checked on the internet, and it appears that he did enter these trials and so on, as he said. In support, I refer you to the book The Octopus by Elizabeth Dilling. A link to a digital copy will be provided. It backs up Mr. Klein's message about all media being in the hands of the Jews as early as 1940, when this book was first published, or even earlier than that. The name Baruch and Frankfurter tie in with another article which I presented some time ago, and Brandes, and his influence in the US. This all gives the Klein article more credibility. So if to begin with you thought it wasn't, if you go and check on those people and what they've done, how they joined together to influence all the lawyers, I think that was an article from maybe 3 weeks ago. You'll see that this man does have some credibility. That's about the end of the article. All I can do is say that we will certainly be putting links to the Octopus, links to the Henry Klein article. I can't give you a link to the Vineyard because that was just a document I had, and I haven't been able to find any links to that. I'll just hand it back over to you fellas and just see if you've got anything to say about what I've just read.
Well, Lindsay, first let me say a huge thank you for putting all of that together. And I think what we might do is whip up a basic Word document with all of the quotes that you just listed and the way that you read them out, so people can go over it again for themselves. And I know with these roundtable discussions, it's good to have the back and forth and the banter, and it's easy to listen to, but sometimes you do have to get out the detailed information the way that you just did. Now, if people struggled through that, and again, I understand it can be a bit lengthy sometimes, there's nothing wrong with rewinding and going back and listening to it once again to get this information properly. Even better, go and read the source material that Lindsay's been citing, because this is very important stuff. And like you said there, Lindsay, you were quoting from Mr. Klein, a Jewish man himself. A lot of your words there, they weren't your words. These were other people's words who you can't attack as being this or that. These are people saying it straight up, they know. And Ethan, with all of that said, I want to throw to you there, mate. What are your thoughts on all of this?
I think that was a fantastic piece by Lindsay. I've read that all before. We obviously send the agendas before the show, and I've read Lindsay's protocols feature piece that he's had ready to go, and you hit the nail right on the head, Johnno. Vitally important information. We talk a lot on the show about, you know who's causing this, you know the agenda behind it, you know, etc., etc. Well, there it is laid out in front of you. Getting in depth down the rabbit hole into some of these larger agendas that are at hand. And I want to thank Lindsay for, first of all, widening my knowledge on this topic and specifically the protocol, since I've met him, it inspired me to do a lot greater research into it rather than just what I had already I'd known prior to meeting him, and I just want to thank him for putting that together. And I encourage the listeners, as you did, Johnno, to listen back and to take that information in and interpret it for yourself, and share it around, share all that information around, because it needs to be shared, and we should definitely have that Word document up for everyone. But thanks for that, Lindsay.
Yeah, and can I say, Ethan, on that, I'm very confident that at some point in the future, somebody is going to take excerpts from our shows, and particularly shows like this and segments like this, and they'll try and paint you, myself, Tristan, anybody involved in the show, especially Lindsay, they'll try and paint us as being this, that, or the other. Anti this, anti that, monsters of some kind. That's what they're going to try and do, and unfortunately a lot of people will just listen to those accusations against us and believe it. But I'm no longer too concerned about those people who are just believing what they're told to believe. I'm more concerned about the opinions of people who do their own research. So if you ever hear someone make those kinds of accusations against anyone involved in this show, or anyone who talks about these things, my recommendation to you is that you go and read the material for yourself. If you do that, if you read the protocols, if you read some of the articles that Lindsay was just reading out from people like Mr. Klein, if you can read all of that, and you still believe that us, by talking about this, are somehow bad, then fine, at least you've done the research. But I put to you that anyone who goes and looks into this themselves will discover something that will, if they didn't already know it, blow their mind. Tristan, what say you?
Yeah, look, for the listeners that aren't familiar with it, I'd like to read out a couple of the protocols.
Read out the whole lot. Go with the 24. If you've got the 24 up, read out the
All
titles.
24?
Yeah, do it, and name them and read them out. This is important. It takes a minute.
Yeah, no worries. I'll try and go through as quickly as I can. Number 1, the base doctrine. Right lies in might. The themes of that are freedom and liberty, authority and power, and gold equals money. The second one is economic war and disorganization lead to international government. The themes for that are international political economic conspiracy and press/media as tools. Number 3, methods of conquest. Jewish people, arrogant and corrupt, chooseness and election, public service. Number 4, destruction of religion by materialism. Now, this is a big one for me. Businesses as cold and heartless, Gentiles as slaves. Number 5, despotism and modern progress. The themes of that are Jewish ethics, Jewish people's relationship to larger society. Number 6, the acquisition of land, i.e. Israel, and the encouragement of speculation, ownership of land for the themes. Number 7, a prophecy of worldwide war, and the themes for that are internal unrest and discord versus court system, and leading to war versus shalom/peace. Number 8, the transitional government, which is a criminal element for the themes. Number 9, the all-embracing propaganda, the themes of which are law, education, and, as some of the live chat listeners have been saying, Freemasonry. Number 10, abolition of the Constitution and rise of the autocracy. Politics, majority rule, liberalism, and family. Number 11, the Constitution of autocracy and universal rule. Gentiles, political Jewish involvement, and again, Freemasonry.
And on that note, because this is probably taking a little bit longer than I expected, that's 11 of the 24, Tristan. We encourage people who aren't familiar with this to go and look at it for themselves. You can get a copy of the book online. It's easy to find.
I'll post it on the live chat now.
It'll be at AusRoundtable.com for people to go and read it for themselves. And again, people can say whatever they like about the people who talk about this. What's more important is that if you actually care about the truth, you do your own research and read it for yourself. And when you do, I think it'll blow your mind. Now, I'd love to sit here and talk about this all day. It's a fundamentally important topic. But sadly, we simply don't have the time for it on this episode. I do promise, though, that we're going to talk about these things a little bit more often on this show than we have in the past. And in the live chat, I did post that. I said, listen, guys, we're going to be talking about these kinds of things more often into the future. And here are some of the responses that I got. I'm Another Aussie says, good. Watcher1421 says, excellent. Patrice Lacoz, a new listener, I think, says, excellent. And then I did say in the live chat that for me, the gloves are now off. I'm going to talk about any truth that I think needs to be talked about. And justiceforgermans.com in the live chat says, do you mean the gloves are off because you were attacked? Well, I'll talk more about this on Sunday sessions later this afternoon. But I think we're all being attacked. And once you fully understand what attack is taking place, you only have two options. Defend yourself and your people, or lay down like a little baby and let them do what they want to you. And they will, and they talk about it, and they laugh about it. Lindsay, I'll throw back to you.
Yeah. I don't want to keep. Oh, but you all know how I think because I've spoken a few times about this. But I don't want to keep driving it in. I think the point you made was true. People go and read this stuff themselves. They can work out whether, in fact, it is a a, a, a forgery or whether, in fact, what's happening is true. I've said in the past, I don't care if it was Eskimos who wrote this. I don't care who it was. If you look at what's happening, it's all coming true. So somebody somewhere who wrote it. It wouldn't matter if it was Machiavelli. Somebody somewhere wrote this, and it's all coming true. So somebody else beside the writer has implemented this, and they're doing it by taking over all the political leaders of the world. We know that Britain's under the thumb. We saw Netanyahu in the Congress in the US, and them all bowing down. They were just about licking his toes. We've got it with our friends here in this metadata. We saw all of them gathered together to enforce the metadata laws, and they're supposed to be our representatives. No, they're representing whoever's running this protocol business. So I won't go on any more about it, but it's just become so obvious to people like myself, and I'm just hoping that others will do the research and maybe see some of the things that I've seen.
Lindsay, I'm glad you say that, and a lot of people, especially if they've been conditioned and they haven't started to undo the conditioning for themselves, they'll instantly say, oh, hold on, but that whole thing was an anti-Semitic forgery. That's what it says on Wikipedia,
Yeah.
An anti-Semitic forgery. Well, like you said, Lindsay, let's just pretend for a moment that it is a forgery. Of course, as one of our listeners pointed out last week, a forgery is just a copy of something that's true. But let's pretend that it is a forgery. This book is very, very old, and it essentially predicts things that have come to pass. So much of what it says is reality today. So before you worry about who wrote it, let's concern ourselves with the fact that someone did write it, and it's all coming to pass. And once we get our heads around that, then we can start looking at who wrote it and who's behind all of this. But the first thing you have to understand is it is happening today. Tristan, what say you?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the thing that scares me is that no one is aware of these things. And you talk about these protocols to anyone aware, and they think you're talking about some fantasy movie or something like that. And it's like, oh, what movie was that from, or what story is that? No, this is happening to us today, and it's really hard to get that across to people. It's so severe and has so many effects on so many aspects of our society and our individual lives that I'm very frustrated that people aren't aware of this. What do you say, Ethan?
I completely agree, mate. I don't have much to add to any of the discussion rather than to just reinforce what's already been said, to do your own research, interpret it your own ways, and understand that no matter what you may believe of who wrote it, etc., this is a blueprint for what has come true, and that should be concerning to anyone. And it as you said, Tristan, is frustrating, but through avenues like this and through people spreading the word, a lot more people are becoming familiar with it, as I said, myself included. And again, I just want to thank Lindsay for that, so I'll throw it back to you guys.
Well, look, it's a very important topic. I think we should all get one final word in before we wrap it up. Let me just say this, and I shouldn't have to repeat this, but each one of these shows is a distinct thing, so I'll repeat this once more. I'm not sitting here criticising the learned elders of Zion or the text or what it's doing, and then linking that and saying, well, all the Jews are evil or any of that kind of thing. I know some people do that. That's up to them. They can have their opinions. That's not my personal opinion. I've been fortunate enough to know some lovely people who have been Jewish in my lifetime. In fact, when I was a child, one of our family friends, the kids who I stayed at their house all the time, they had a Super Nintendo when all we had was a regular Nintendo. Stayed at their house all the time. They were Jewish. I didn't even know that 2 years later. That's just how normal it was to me. And in my adult life, I've had Jewish friends as well. I'm not sitting here saying that all Jews are bad. In fact, I know a gentleman who attended a very elite Jewish school down there in Melbourne, and he was a friend of mine at university, and I don't believe that he has anything to do with any of this. I don't believe he ever would. He's a good, honest person. I happen to think that most Jews, at least in Australia, the ones that I've met, are good, decent people. This isn't about criticising Jews. This is about criticising whoever wrote the book, the Protocols of Leonard Zion, criticising what they're doing to this world today, and understanding that there is a contrived plot to do all of this. Now, in the live chat, people have been discussing who's really in charge. Is it the Vatican? Is it Switzerland? Is it the Pope? Is it this? Is that? Very interesting conversation, good discussion topic. It's good to see people talking about that. I'm not even sitting here and saying that the elite Zionist Jews control the world. I don't know if they do. I don't know if they're being set up as patsies for somebody else. I don't know who's really in charge. What I'm more concerned about is our nations are being destroyed, our culture's being destroyed, our families are being destroyed, our little kids are being destroyed. It's all going to plan. It's all going to someone's plan. And if you're any kind of grown adult, you should be looking into that plan for yourself. That's my final thought on this topic. We'll go around the table, we'll get everyone's final thought, and then we'll have to wrap up for the show. So on this particular topic, Ethan, what are your final words?
Johnno, yeah, as I said, I think you summed it up perfectly. Just do your own research, and really, like, it should concern you. This should concern everyone, because we have an amazing platform right now that we can broadcast to the world, and anyone that wants to watch and listen and connect with us can. And we have such incredible information at our disposal right now to spread vitally important topics and information like we are right now. And we need to utilize that by capitalizing and spreading it to other people and getting these discussions going and having these roundtables as a platform to get these messages out. So I just encourage everyone to follow those things, to look into it for themselves, spread it amongst their family, friends, discussion points, or just do it for your own research, for your own your own perception of what's going on, and try to improve it, especially the people that haven't heard of it before tonight. And that's my final thought.
Tristan, final thoughts on this particular topic?
Yeah, look, going around the chat, people are posting links on how to get this book. I really recommend reading it. I haven't read it yet, but it's definitely something that we starting soon. It's crucial that we familiarize ourselves with the principles, protocols rather, of the Elders of Zion, and raise awareness. I think that we have an obligation to talk to people about this, because it's just so severe. And you look at it. I posted a link on Wikipedia. You go through this and you look at it and you think, holy crap, this is all happening right now, and you can see the future. So I'll throw to you, Lindsay.
Yeah, there's nothing much for me to add. I thought you summed it up very well a minute ago, Johnno, so I couldn't say anything better than you said then. I'm not trying to pee in your pocket or anything, but I thought...
Matt, I really appreciate that. And this is a very important topic for all of us, but also for me on a personal level, because I started the show along with yourself and Ethan 6 months ago, and in that time I've been doing plenty of research, and my views on certain things have changed, and my priorities have changed as well. And I'm at the point in my life where I think, well, if there was ever anything to happen to me as a result of talking about these things, which I don't think will happen, but if that ever were to come to pass, well, I'll let the cards fall as they will. I can't sit by knowing what I know and not start saying something now, because the stakes are far too high, and I'm tired of sitting on the sidelines. And on that note, it is time for us to wrap the show up. It's been a terrific 2 hours. It goes so quickly. We'll have to leave your Facebook article for next week, Ethan, and my limited hangout feature piece will have to wait once again. So I wrote that one a few weeks ago, and we just never seem to get time for it. But I promise next week I will talk about limited hangout. I've got a big feature piece on that. So what we'll do is we'll go around the table for final thoughts for episode 25, starting with you, Tristan. It's always good to have you on board. Anything you want to add before we wrap the show up?
Oh, look, it's always a pleasure, Johnno. This is a big topic for me. I love the Zionistic topic, and I'm really looking forward to seeing. You're taking the gloves off. I'm really keen to see what punches you can throw at this, what we can all throw at this, because I feel that we're not throwing enough punches in that direction.
Well, I'm sure that in 7 days' time you'll have read the entire protocols and you can give us an even better breakdown.
We'll see.
We tell the people to do their research, or we've got to do our own, don't we?
Yeah, we do indeed.
Ethan, it's been terrific to have you on board. Obviously, it's a bit tougher with the Google Hangout, and we've both had a couple of pieces that we couldn't get time to fit in this week. I hope you'll forgive me for that. Any final thoughts for episode 25 of the Australian Roundtable?
I loved it. As I said, just to reinforce what Tristan said, I'm so looking forward to exploring these sort of topics more and more hardcore, in-depth topics in the future, which is the way that it should go. You should follow the truth no matter where it leads, and you should not be afraid to speak truth, because if you speak truth, then you've got nothing to fear. And I think that reigns supreme, and I love the diversity of the topics that we do every week on the show. I love the diversity we had today, from genetically modified organisms to superannuation to a whole bunch of things, and then just to cap it off with Lindsay's talk there. I'm just so happy, and as I say every week, I'm just so happy to be a part of that community. So thanks, John. I look forward to next week.
Yeah, diversity of topics, Ethan. That's one diversity I don't particularly like. Lindsay, I'll give you your final words for episode 25.
Yeah, no, I've really enjoyed it too, and it was good for me to get that done, because I've been, like I said in the beginning, I promised somebody that I'd do it, and it's gone on for weeks and weeks, and I hadn't done it. Now I feel like I've fulfill what I was asked to do, so I don't feel so bad now. And I don't think I didn't approach it from a bashing point of view. I just tried to put both sides by Jewish authors, so that I'd sort of stand neutral if anything. But yeah, no, I think the program's going well. I've got to be careful saying that because I seem to be doing all the local stuff, or a lot of the local stuff, so that might sound big-headed. But it has gone well, and I enjoy listening to, well, Ethan's thing with the article about how we're going to get around the metadata and things like that. That's what I love about this program, is that I'm learning from you young fellas, and to me that's really great. All right, thanks for that.
No worries, mate. Well, in the live chat, people have been very positive in their appraisal of today's episode, so I'm very appreciative of that. There's been more than 40 people watching for the entire last hour. And you're quite right, Lindsay. People have been asking you about the protocols a lot. Like they've been asking you to do this segment, and we've kept putting it off. But finally today we thought it was time, and I'm so glad that we had a chance to finally talk about it. I do want to say that we will have our Q&A after this episode, just like we always do, for about 30 minutes. So please, when we do wrap up the show, just keep listening. It will just be the official show that ends in a few moments' time. We do still have the mailbag segment. I didn't get time to fit that in today. I want to say thank you to everyone who's taken the time to reach out to us via email and via our website, AusRoundtable.com. We do read all the messages that we get, and we try to respond to them in a timely manner. One gentleman in particular made just a wonderful offer to us in terms of contributing to the cost of running the show. And when I read that particular email, it really did make my day, and I'm sure you'll agree, to get that kind of feedback. It's not about the fact that people want to give us money, which is just a nice thing in general. It's the idea that they would take the time to write that email and show us the support that they have. And look, we do this show for free, and we want people to have access to it for free, and this show will always be available for free. At the moment, we are still working out ways that all these people who keep contacting us saying they want to give us a financial contribution for what we do, we're still working on finding out a way where we can do that. And how do I say, it's difficult. We start the show for free, and we're still trying to work out a way to let people contribute in the way that they want to, without coming across as one of those shows that does start doing the show for money, because that's never our intention. But to those of you who do want to offer financially, we are working on ways to make that happen in a way that's fair for everybody. I do normally promote other shows at this time, but we're very short for time. One show I will promote is a new show that I've started on Friday mornings, afternoons in Australia, Thursday nights, late Thursday night North American time. It's a Skeptic Community Roundtable, and we had a pilot episode 0, during the week. It went wonderfully well. It was a 3-hour show. I was lucky enough to be joined by Press Reset Earth, Garbage Media, and Matrix Decoded, who was up at like 4 o'clock his time. And the show, I was just blown away by how well it went. Nothing to do with me. Those three I thought were terrific guests. I'll try and get them on more often. It's going to be a Skeptic Community Roundtable where we can talk about any topics that we like, but we don't have to be as formal and professional, if we can use that word, like we do on this show. It's a bit more open and let people talk about any topic. And if you haven't already checked it out, just go to John LeBon, listen to episode 0 for yourself. That'll become a regular thing as of Thursday night American, Friday afternoon Australian time next week. I'm sure there's other things that I forgot to mention. I do apologize for that, but we try to keep these shows to 2 hours. I do want to read out one final time. Everything that we talk about, we provide links at AusRoundtable.com. Now, I was a little bit slack during the week updating for episode 24. I promise I'll fix that up very shortly. But going back before episode 24, every single episode has its own page. It all has its own MP3 download option via Podbean, the link to the episode itself on YouTube, and most importantly, all of the links and all the source material that we provide. And it's not just there so you can use it for your own benefit. We put it there hoping that you will. If you don't do your own if you just listen to us, look, that's better than watching TV. But if you're not doing your own reading and your own research, you're not really making the most of what's out there, and we try and make that easier for you. I want to say a huge thanks to all of the people who've been involved in the live chat. Once again, I thought the live chat tonight was terrific. We had Rorschach as a moderator. I don't know if he had to ban anyone. I don't think he did. Rorschach can get in touch with us for Sunday sessions, which leads to my final thought for this afternoon, which is that Sunday sessions will go ahead at 7 p.m. Brisbane time, as it always does. For those who aren't aware, that's just where myself and whoever wants to join me, usually that includes Silver Fox, Tristan, and Ethan, but other people are welcome to join us via Google Hangout as well. We sit around and just talk and have an open discussion about anything we want to discuss. I throw some music in there. I usually get one too many frothies into me. Tonight I'll probably try and tone the frothies down, given that I'm still recovering from the watch house last night.
Stay tuned to that story.
And there is a huge story coming that I think some people might be interested in hearing. So that's a Sunday session, 7 p.m. Brisbane time. That's 8 p.m. Melbourne and Sydney. I haven't posted that on my channel yet, But if you go to John LeBon in about 10 minutes, it'll be there waiting for you, and I'm sure it'll be a lot of fun. If you want to get involved in the show, as always, just add me on Skype. I'll send you through a link, and it's a lot of fun. If you've never done it before, we've been fortunate enough to be joined by a whole bunch of people who've never done live shows before. They've had a great time. So if you want to get on a show like this, well, the Sunday sessions is a great way to start. So like I said, that starts in about 90 minutes, but we do have to wrap up for today. We've gone a bit over time. This has been episode 25 of the Australian Roundtable. Again, stick around, live listeners, for the Q&A afterwards, but if you're listening to this on the official upload, we're going to say goodbye today. Episode 25 on March 29, 2015. Thank you for taking the time to listen, and we'll see you at 3 p.m. Brisbane time next week.